All right, welcome to the Week 4 Forum. This week we are looking at one chapter, and that is Chapter 4, Civil Liberties and Civil Rights. I think in the subsequent edition, the next edition, which you guys don't have to worry about, this is actually two chapters, and that's one of the reasons why I'm basically just concentrating on this one chapter this week because there's a lot of material in here. Uh, First and foremost, let's begin and recognize that the origin of civil liberties really lies within the framework of the Constitutional Convention debates and the debates over ratification of the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists were the ones that were primarily making the case at the ratification debates in the respective 13, former colonies. Um, and of course, they weren't all taking place in all the states, but in several of the more important ones. Um, that that there was a need for a federal Bill of Rights. Now, so it's also important to keep in mind, recalling what we were dealing with in last week's discussion of federalism. Federalism back then was a different animal than it is today. And in fact, the Bill of Rights really didn't apply to the states initially. And in fact, that doesn't really change until ratification of the 14th Amendment. Now, ratification of the 14th Amendment basically, I mean, this is an important thing, and I always try to emphasize to my classes that the 14th Amendment is one of the most consequential revisions of the Constitution, okay, because it effectively says citizens of the states are also citizens of the United States. So they're effectively, the drafters of that amendment are effectively saying that citizens of the states are also citizens of the federal government, and the federal government has the power to protect their rights. And so it effectively empowers Congress to look into, and for that matter, the courts, to look into violations of, of people's civil liberties. And of course, civil liberties are these constraints that we put on government, and most of them are enunciated in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So through what is known as the doctrine of incorporation, the 14th Amendment effectively says, the Fourth Amendment applies to the states. Police cannot arbitrarily, invade your home and search it. Okay. So from there, I mean, this chapter deals with a lot of very important stuff. It deals extensively with some of the more important of the Bill of Rights, especially the First Amendment, certainly the Second Amendment, and then what are known as the Due Process Amendments, right? The Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and Eighth Amendments, which are really the sort of the most important ones in terms of protecting against violations of due process. Now, you could ask the question, why are so many of the Bill of Rights aimed at people who are accused of criminal acts, right? They're criminals, right? The reason for that is to try to prevent the law from being used as a cudgel, either political or otherwise, to use the criminal code to oppress people. Okay, so it is, those amendments are fundamentally supports for ultimately what is the due process of law and the belief that rule of law has to be applied in an even manner. Okay. Also in this chapter, you've got the idea of the right to privacy, which again is not a clearly enunciated, there is nowhere mentioned the idea of privacy, but then there are several amendments which imply privacy very strongly. And of course, privacy, we're usually talking about matters of, of personal importance, sex, death, things like that. So euthanasia has been kind of drawn into this question of, what do we have a right to do? And of course, same-sex relationships, same-sex marriage, are kind of also drawn into that notion of what is privacy. And of course, abortion is, considered right now, currently, to be a matter of privacy. That this is a woman's right to make that kind of decision about her reproductive system. Now, that's a very controversial issue, and there are a lot of states that are right now basically challenging that notion, which was established by a Supreme Court case called Roe versus Wade in the early 1970s. And there are a number of justices on the Supreme Court who are on record as being hostile to Roe, the Roe decision. And so there's a question of whether that decision will be overturned, and states will be empowered to to basically ban abortion. I predict that if that does occur, and then of course there is a case being heard, a challenge to a Mississippi law that basically is an absolute ban on abortion, that you'll see some real political consequences that flow from that. Also in this chapter is the idea of civil rights, and that is again the question: how do we distinguish civil liberties from civil rights? And what we note is that while civil liberties and the guarantees of due process have been protected for majorities, there have often been people who were subject to discrimination due to factors like gender, due to factors like racial identity or ethnic identity, and things like that. And so the idea that people's civil liberties have not been protected leads to questions about whether they have a right to claim redress, and also whether their status as a minority should give them some sort of protection. And of course there have been a series of important civil rights movements that have taken place really going back into the 1950s with the beginning of the Black Civil Rights Movement. Of course, there have been waves of women's rights and feminist movements that also are very important. And the question, of course, is what to do about these things, and that gives rise to the issue of affirmative action, which again, these are active attempts by the government to redress these injustices. And one of the things that's happening right now in the city of Tulsa is a claim on the part of Black citizens who were direct descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre to some kind of reparations. And then there is the general claim to reparations that many Black Americans advocate, and that is something certainly that we can discuss. I think that's an interesting topic to me. It's a lot to talk about this week. So again, bring your confusion to class. If there, to the forum. If there's anything I can do to help clarify, I'm happy to do it. Like I said, I monitor these forums very carefully. I check in every day. I try to live the values that I try to extend to you. I always find a time early in the morning to check that at a glance page and see if anyone's posted anything. And I try to read everything that you're doing that morning. So I won't always reply to everything, but I'll try to reply to everything that I have the time to, and everything that strikes me as being first of all, you telling me you need the help, and secondly, you saying something that I think is worth discussing. I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on anyone that I don't comment on, but in any event, that's simply where it goes. If you're making uninteresting comments, I'm probably not going to comment. So let's have a great week. Let's learn a lot.